out, and if anybody's standing in the back wants seats, there's a few more scattered around here. If you've got an open seat next to you, raise your hand. There's a couple in the back there, a couple around. So come on in and find yourself a seat. So thanks so much for coming out. And I see many different faces here. How many people have never been to NASA's Langley Research Center before? Oh, this is fantastic. So the majority of the audience has never been here before. Welcome. And thanks so much for helping us celebrate our 100th birthday here. So that's a long time. And during that time, there have been a lot of amazing accomplishments that occurred right here, not only in these facilities, but more especially by the team. The team at Langley is so important. So the team here at Langley obviously started 100 years ago. NASA was not around then. NASA didn't come about until much later, about halfway through that history. So by the time that NASA started, it was really important that the team here was a major part of all that we did. As a matter of fact, the original Mercury 7 astronauts started their training here because the Johnson Space Center didn't even exist yet. So this team has been an integral part of human spaceflight. I've been very fortunate to be a part of human spaceflight as well. One of the very fortunate few that gets to actually fly in space. But is there anybody else here that might want to fly in space someday? A couple? A couple of you? Good. And I hope you do, because when I was a little kid and I was watching the Apollo program happen and the Apollo astronauts go and walk on the moon, I thought for sure by the time that I was an adult, everybody would be flying in space, right? What happened? I don't know. There's a lot of different explanations about why technology didn't continue to accelerate at the rate that it did. But I will tell you, the people here at the Langley Research Center are continuing to push technology and innovation every single day. They're a part of different equipment and experiments that are currently on the International Space Station, as well as developing the next spacecraft that's going to launch from the U.S. to launch astronauts into space. And also, we're looking very heavily and working on how to return to the moon, to use that as a test bed and as an outpost to learn even more, to solve all the puzzles we need to solve before we can safely send humans all the way to Mars and safely back. So, again, I've been very fortunate. I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. As a kid, I mentioned that I'm watching the Apollo program. Didn't have a telescope, but I used my land surveyor father's land surveying transit to look at the moon and see if I could see where the astronauts were landing. Well, obviously I couldn't, but I had it all plotted out on my Rand McNally map of the moon that I had on my wall, and I had their little landing sites all plotted out there. Well, I didn't have it really totally figured out. It wasn't like I had some big grand plan on how I was going to be an astronaut. Again, I just assumed everybody would be flying in space by the time I was an adult. But I was very fortunate. I went to the U.S. Naval Academy. I flew P-3s in the Navy. I flew oceanographic research, as we mentioned before. Very fortunately traveled to 25 different countries in 1,500 flight hours just in 3 years. Nowadays, we do a lot of that research by satellite. So we don't need that type of mission flown by aircraft anymore, and that's okay. But join the Navy, see the world, I sure did it, and I really enjoyed seeing the world, you know, from aircraft altitude within the atmosphere, but it sure was something to be able to see it from above the atmosphere. After flying with the Navy, I stayed with the Navy Reserve, but went on to work at the Kennedy Space Center as a space shuttle engineer, and then eventually picked up as an astronaut and moved to Houston with the Johnson Space Center. And the reason is because astronaut training originally started here at Langley, but eventually moved to the Johnson Space Center in the Houston area, so that's why the astronauts are there. And as you know, mission control is there, right? So we launch from the U.S., from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and mission control is in Houston. So I'm mentioning all these different NASA centers. Well, what that brings up is that we have NASA centers scattered across the country. And different parts of each and every NASA mission is accomplished at these different centers. And it takes all of us in this massive team to make each mission safe and successful. And you might think, when you think of NASA, you think of a bunch of kind of Big Bang Theory kind of scientist and engineer nerds, right? Yeah? Is that what you usually think? Do you think to work for NASA you have to be an engineer or a scientist? No? Really? What do you think? Yes? No? Yes? You have to be an engineer or scientist? No? I agree with you. I'd say no. Turns out on my first mission, one of the guys I flew with, another astronaut, was a veterinarian. Yeah, he worked on his favorite animals to work on before he came to NASA were large mammals, especially sea mammals, as in sea lions and otters and what else? Porpoises, and he did some whale. He did a lot of whale work. No kidding, he did a lot of work with whales. And ended up being an astronaut because on my first mission, I actually flew with several hundred critters. I had 3 medical doctors, 1 veterinarian. I was one of the 3 military aviators, and a couple of thousand critters on there. No kidding. 1,500 crickets, 200 mice and rats, another couple hundred swordtail fish, and 4 oyster toadfish. We were studying how the microgravity environment of space affects the central nervous system and the brain. Very important stuff to know if we're going to send people in space for longer periods of time. Because that mission was just under 17 days, so kind of a nice long camping trip. But then my next mission was actually part of the construction of the International Space Station, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But just to go back, I was talking about that veterinarian that I flew with on my first mission. Well, that mission, he got to work with animals in space, right? But then it turns out he became a really good space walker. He actually did some of the repair on the Hubble Space Telescope. So what I'm trying to say is that we don't just have scientists and engineers at NASA. We also have to have artists, accountants, attorneys, law enforcement, firefighters. We've got all kinds of different careers that are all part of the NASA team. And most of them you'll see right here at the Langley Research Center. So certainly the math and the science is very, very important. But we also have to have the support of all of the folks. I mean, even thank you very much to the audiovisual people who are behind the scenes here, making sure that this happens, right? And to all the people who made this entire open house happen today. This didn't just happen by accident. So if you think maybe some of the students here, if you think maybe I don't know about being a scientist or an engineer, that may not be my thing, we may still have a very cool spot for you at NASA. So I want to encourage all the students out there to consider it and to check out some of the websites that NASA has, especially some of the YouTube channels. Has really good video that you can take a look at. So I see some people filming, and I would ask that you